Hello everyone and welcome to a new video dedicated to our beloved Snoopy and the world of Peanuts. The Peanuts strip published on December 7th, 1950 is a perfect example of how Charles Schulz knew how to play with logic and the mechanics of humor to create situations that, while based on seemingly trivial concepts, are hilarious because of the way they are presented. In this vignette we see Patty and Shermie, two of the main characters in the early Peanuts strips, engaged in a dialogue that starts with a seemingly obvious statement and develops through a crescendo of increasingly insistent statements, culminating in a conclusion that leaves Shermie completely dumbfounded. The central element of the joke is its gradual construction. Patty begins with a simple observation and, step by step, adds new pieces to what appears to be a startling revelation. The comic effect comes precisely from this progression, which turns something taken for granted into a seemingly momentous discovery. Schulz, even in the early months of publishing the Peanuts strips, demonstrates a great ability to construct gags based not only on words, but also on the characters' facial expressions and body language. The interaction between Patty and Shermie is made even more effective precisely because of these visual details, which emphasize Patty's increasing pressure and Shermie's gradual disorientation. Thematically, this strip anticipates some recurring elements in Schulz's work, such as the juxtaposition between an assertive character and a more reflective and passive one, a mechanism that will be taken up many times in the Peanuts, especially in the dialogues between Lucy and Charlie Brown or between Sally and Linus. Now, let us get to the heart of the strip's analysis, examining each vignette in detail to understand how Schulz constructed the rhythm of the joke and what its effect is on the reader. Like many of the Peanuts' early strips, this one consists of 4 vignettes and follows a specific structure. It starts with an opening statement that introduces the theme of the dialogue, then develops it through a logical progression leading to a final joke with a strong comic impact. The humor of this strip is based on a principle very dear to Schulz, making the obvious surprising. This concept would be echoed often in Peanuts, where the children, with their relentless logic, manage to draw conclusions that, however trivial, appear almost revolutionary. Here, Patty takes on the role of life teacher, imparting a lesson to Shermie that he had never considered before. Her tone is assertive, almost triumphant, while Shermie seems to suffer her logic completely passively, to the point of speechlessness. In the first vignette, we see Patty and Shermie standing facing each other. Patty, with an upright posture and a firmness that leaves no room for doubt, has a confident and determined expression. Her presence is almost commanding, as if she is about to reveal a secret of momentous importance. Shermie, on the other hand, appears visibly more relaxed and casual. Her hands are placed along her hips, in an attitude that suggests calm and a degree of indifference to what is about to happen. Patty begins her speech with a tone that, at first glance, might seem serious, shouty, but which actually conceals an unexpected irony. Her words seem to suggest that she is about to reveal a great universal truth: your mother is a woman. This statement, although it may sound like a shocking revelation, is actually a completely obvious fact. No surprise, no news. However, it is precisely the way Patty communicates it that gives the scene a comic charge. The solemn tone and serious expression with which Patty utters this innocent phrase make it seem as if she is sharing an extraordinary discovery, almost as if she is shedding light on a universal truth hidden from the general public for millennia. Shermie, meanwhile, listens in silence, showing no sign of disbelief or astonishment. Her face remains impassive, as if Patty's revelation were the most natural thing in the world. However, it is precisely in this indifferent reaction that the comic force of the moment lies. The discovery Patty is trying to sensationalize is so trivial and uninteresting that her companion seems to be not even the least bit impressed. Schulz skillfully plays on the contrast between the emphasis Patty puts on her announcement and Shermie's utter disregard. The scene, while starting with a statement that would be obvious in any other context, becomes the breeding ground for a subtle comedy that arises from the absurdity of wanting to make extraordinary what is, in fact, extraordinarily ordinary. This mechanism is a classic comic device that Schultz uses to elicit a laugh from readers, taking a mundane concept and transforming it, through tone and context, into something unexpectedly surprising. In the second vignette, Patty continues her speech undaunted, this time with even greater intensity. The tone of her voice grows in volume and conviction, as if every word she utters is an incontrovertible truth from which no one can escape. With a confidence that leaves no room for doubt, he adds more details that, though simple, seem to gain more and more weight through his emphasis. Your grandmother is a woman. Your wife will be a woman. As Patty articulates these words, her attitude becomes more and more peremptory. The gestures accompanying each statement are increasingly pronounced and theatrical. With her finger raised, she is not only pointing at Shermy, she is also poking him with a kind of authority that could almost seem schoolteacher-like. Every movement, every expression seems to be designed to imprint an indelible impression on the minds of those who are listening to her, as if she were imparting fundamental life lessons that no one would dare question. Shermy, meanwhile, seems to falter under the intensity of such a statement. Her face, which initially showed an expression of curiosity, is now crossed with signs of growing perplexity. It is still not entirely clear what he is thinking, but it is evident that Patty has turned on something in his mind. He is beginning to realize the magnitude of what Patty is saying, and perhaps in the corner of his head, he is wondering if he is really understood correctly. This accumulation of information is not accidental. It is a powerful narrative trick, particularly effective in comedy, where each new addition seems to amplify the effect of the previous one. Every word, every statement Patty makes, is emphasized by exaggerated gesturing, creating a crescendo that makes the situation seem increasingly ridiculous and absurd. In this way, the revelation Patty offers not only builds up to a comic escalation, but also becomes a way to highlight her assertive and somewhat over-the-top character, which clashes with Shermy's growing confusion. In the third vignette, Patty comes to her final conclusion, emphatically declaring that all of Shermy's daughters will also be girls, almost as if it were a shocking and indisputable revelation. Her pointing finger becomes even more peremptory, while her posture suggests a kind of logical triumph, as if she has just won an intellectual battle against Shermy. Patty, with her attitude of confident superiority, seems almost satisfied that she has brought to light a mystery that, in reality, is no mystery at all. Shermy, on the other hand, is visibly impressed by the sequence of statements and begins to look increasingly overwhelmed. His gaze, puzzled and perhaps a little frustrated, reveals his inability to respond to an argument that is based on blatant obviousness. Here a typical aspect of Schultz's humor emerges, the reversal of logic. What should be obvious suddenly becomes a surprising fact, generating hilarity because of its speciousness. The ridicule arises precisely from the emphasis with which Patty presents a truth that does not need to be discovered. Patty's insistent repetition, with the addition of the final sentence that closes the discourse decisively, creates an effect of psychological pressure on Shermy, who seems to have no escape. The comic situation is realized in the helplessness of Shermy, who can do nothing but accept a conclusion that leaves no room for doubt. The effect of this pressure is a key element of Schultz's visual and verbal humor, which plays on the absurdity of a logic that manages to take hold precisely because of the tone of seriousness and certainty with which it is exposed. In this way, the illustration of the scene becomes even richer, with a greater focus on the dynamic between the two characters and the strength of the irony that emerges from the small, everyday follies of the Peanuts world. In the final vignette, we see Shermy alone, walking absorbed in his thoughts, his gaze fixed in front of him. His expression is that of someone who is thinking deeply about something, but unable to get his ideas in order. Then, in an almost inaudible whisper, he utters a single word, charged with a certain disbelief.
Wow.
This simple but incredibly effective reaction is perfect to end the gag. Shermy does not even attempt to retort or refute Patty. There is no sign of excessive frustration or disagreement. On the contrary, Shermy seems to absorb Patty's words as a kind of enlightenment, as if her remarks had just revealed a universal truth. Despite the superficiality of the discussion, her reaction makes the topic discussed seem something extremely profound. Charles Schulz, with his mastery, uses space and silence to amplify the comic effect, giving the moment an unexpected shade of reflection. Now that Patty is no longer present, Shermie finally has the space to process what she has just heard. This silence between the characters becomes the fertile ground for contemplation, and the result is a moment of pure philosophical, almost surreal introspection that makes us reflect on how sometimes a simple wow can be the most sincere way to describe an entire experience, no matter how trivial. The humor of this strip is based on a principle that Charles Schulz would refine and refine over the years: the idea that children, while grappling with the simplest and most everyday issues, approach them with an almost philosophical seriousness and depth. This contrast between their innocence and the seriousness with which they deal with even the most mundane issues gives rise to comic and often thoughtful situations. In this particular case, the heartfelt tone of Patty, who seems to take such a seemingly trivial matter seriously, and the incredulous reaction of Shermie, who cannot understand the reason for so much fervor, make the scene not only funny, but also memorable. The comedy arises precisely from this dynamic of misunderstanding, which makes one laugh precisely because it manages to convey in a direct way a situation in which any adult could recognize himself: the inability to fully understand the logic of childish thinking. Moreover, the theme of female supremacy, while treated in a light and almost joking manner, is not to be underestimated. This hint of power dynamics between the sexes, which emerges in the discussion among the children, somewhat anticipates what will be central themes in the Peanuts, especially in the relationships between the series' most iconic characters, such as Lucy and Charlie Brown, or between Sally and Linus. These dynamics, though sometimes comic and mostly treated with the right tone of levity, end up reflecting the deeper nuances of everyday life, creating a mix of laughter and reflection that makes the strip unique. Schulz once again demonstrates his incredible ability to create comedy without resorting to egregious situations or elaborate jokes. Instead, he focuses on the essentiality of everyday life and the way the characters interact with each other, making use of surprising logic that prompts the viewer to reflect. His talent lies in capturing humor in small gestures, silences, and spontaneous reactions. In this strip, for example, the comic effect is built through the characters' facial expressions and gestures, which evolve in perfect harmony with the dialogue. This visual progression is one of the most powerful tools Schulz used to enrich the narrative and amplify the comic impact of his stories. Attention to visual detail, then, becomes one of the hallmarks of his style, contributing greatly to making the Peanuts a work as innovative as it is long-lived. His ability to tell universal stories and transcend the limits of conventional comics is what has allowed the series to maintain a freshness and appeal that knows no time. That is why, even in a seemingly simple strip, Schulz manages to infuse an energy that goes beyond pure entertainment, leaving readers with a reflection that can be appreciated by several generations.
If you enjoyed yourself, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the little bell to stay updated, and see you next, friends.